I'm going to share with you some tips for making your cave surveys more efficient so that you can either collect more data and see more cave or possibly finish your trip sooner. The general strategies are to get as much done before going in the cave as possible and simplify the process once you've begun the survey. Tip 1 is to customize your protractor. I have a strong preference for the cave compass made by Pat Robertson. If you haven't tried it before, then I would strongly encourage you to buy or borrow one and use it on at least one survey trip. They are $7 shipped for the Imperial version and $8 for the metric version. There's a link for where you can buy them in the description. I make a few modifications. The first is that I add small dots of hot melt glue near the north and south ends of the dial. This makes it much easier to turn. You can also put a small dot of paint or nail polish on the north side. Use a knife to make small score lines so that the glue adheres better. The second modification I make is to add a caper cord with a small carabiner. The cord is about 10 inches long. I use a small hole punch to put a hole in the corner, but you can also use a drill bit. I learned to do this after accidentally dropping my only protractor down a hole between breakdown, where it couldn't be retrieved. I now also carry a spare protractor in my pack in case I lose or break my primary protractor. I like the small S carabiner as opposed to a fixed tether because I can move it to the active page I'm working on, and it acts as a bookmark. Tip number 2 is to customize your survey book. The inside covers of the Write in the Rain 6-ring binder contain some information on scales and unit conversions, but these aren't especially useful for cave survey. I take advantage of this space to add a few reference items that are of use. The first is a list of compass bearings from 0 to 360 with their associated backsight values on the opposite side. I usually do this math in my head on surveys where we aren't using corrected backsights, but this can be difficult sometimes after you've been surveying for many hours. This small chart makes it easy to double check if needed. The second table I tape into the inside cover is a trigonometry chart to determine how much I need to shorten high angle shots in the plan view. This table is in 5-foot and 5-degree increments. Other values can easily be interpolated. This is equivalent to the one printed on the cave compass, but it's much easier to read. On the inside back cover, I have a list of functions for the Disto X. Many of these I rarely use, but there have been occasions when an accidental button press has changed units, turned off Bluetooth, or put a front sight instrument into backsight mode, and having these functions available is critical to getting the device functioning properly again. The last modification is to include a cave symbol cheat sheet in the back of the book. I print these on plastic with a laser printer. I very rarely need to refer to it now that I have more experience sketching, but at my age sometimes a little reminder can be helpful. If you want a digital version of any of these charts or cheat sheets, send me an email, which can be found in the description, and I'll email you my templates. Some of these I print using a label printer, but you can also print on standard paper and cover them with packing tape. Tip number 3 is to customize your survey paper. If you watched my video on sketching, then you may have noticed that I use custom printed survey pages. I used to buy survey paper from Intermountain Outfitters, which is a good option. I then used to take those pages and print my own title pages and modify the data and graph pages to include places for recording standard information like the date of the survey, sketcher name, page number, north arrow, and scale. I've since developed my own custom pages and print on blank Write in the Rain paper, number 395, using a color laser printer. If you decide to do this yourself, you don't want to use an inkjet printer because the ink will bleed, and you want to print in a light color such as blue or green so that there's enough contrast between the background and pencil marks. Having pre-printed pages saves a lot of time writing all this information out while underground, and it's a good reminder of what information to include, so you don't have to waste mental energy trying to remember those things during a cave trip. For the graph pages I have both Imperial and metric versions. And again, if you want a copy of these templates in either Adobe Illustrator format that you can edit, or a basic PDF version for printing, just send me an email, which again can be found in the description. Tip number 4 is to prepare your survey instruments. Most of this next tip deals with the Disto X, which I strongly recommend for both improving the speed and accuracy of your surveys. In fact, I have 2 that are set up for front sights and corrected back sights, which makes survey data collection extremely efficient. They are an expensive investment, and I recommend storing them in a Pelican 1015 case during transport. I keep another copy of the button functions on a slip of waterproof plastic underneath the rubber insert. I've made a few modifications to my Disto X. Using a jigsaw, I cut a small rectangular piece of polycarbonate and glued it to the LCD screen to protect it from impacts. Look for polycarbonate that is often sold under the trade name Lexan at your local hardware store in a thickness of approximately 1/10 of an inch. Cut it to size and round off any sharp corners with a file. I use a very small amount of AquaSeal just on the very edges. The next thing I do is to add a large drop of hot melt glue to the red on button. This makes it easier to locate in the dark and when taking readings from awkward positions. Those who like to use the timer sometimes also put glue on this button. You should also add a small wrist tether for situations where dropping the Disto X might be disastrous. I also mark the bottom of the Disto using red nail polish, where the laser axis intersects the bottom face. This is the reference point for all of your Disto X measurements. In addition to these modifications to the Disto X itself, I also carry a device in my repair kit that is a small buck voltage converter that has a Molex connector on one end for attaching a Stenlight battery and a 5-volt USB output on the other end. I then have a small micro USB cable. This tiny device allows me to use backup headlamp batteries to recharge a Disto X or GoPro. For most cave trips this shouldn't be necessary, but I've had a few rare instances where the Disto X battery mysteriously discharged, and it has also come in handy on multi-day expeditions where I don't have access to an electrical outlet. A full recharge of the Disto X only requires about 10 to 15% of the capacity of one Sten battery. If you don't use Sten-style batteries, you can probably use this type of converter and modify it to use whatever type of battery you may be using for your primary headlamp. The fifth and final tip is to keep gear organized for each person on the team. The point person will need a way to mark stations, a way to label the stations, and be able to provide a target for the instrument person. I like to have all of the needed gear organized so I can just hand it to the point person and off they go. This little nylon zippered pouch is designed for use with 300-foot rolls of flagging tape, and it has a grommet in the bottom for dispensing the tape. I include 2 Sharpie markers for setting stations and labeling the flagging tape, and inside the pouch is a small reflective target for use with the Disto. This often works better than a muddy glove. If you use a different system for marking stations, such as whiteout or nail polish, then maybe give the point person all of this gear in a small bag that can be clipped to a belt for easy access. For sketching, I like to use a small shoulder bag that can carry the survey book, a couple of pencils, my reading glasses, and a spare point light in case I need to provide a light for a back sight. If I'm going to be surveying in larger passages or rooms, then I often bring my own Disto so that I can collect more accurate L-rods and distances to intermediate landmarks. Hopefully you picked up a couple of useful suggestions that will help make your surveys more efficient and enjoyable. If you did, then please click the like button and subscribe if you aren't already. If you have some of your own tips for a more efficient cave survey, please share them in the comments below.